For my final speech, I decided to look over some chapters in the book and pick basically two chapters that I thought were really interesting and take a few concepts out of those chapters I thought were cool and relatable. Um, the first chapter I looked over was chapter 4, which was about nonverbal communication. And this is something that is definitely fascinating to me and something that's really interesting because it's something that is used every single day of our lives. And especially now where everyone's wearing a mask, I'm constantly looking to see if someone's smiling or even just their eyes maybe closing a little bit, see if maybe that's hinting at a smile or something. But one of the types of nonverbal communication is known as an illustrator. And I thought these were really cool because in sports, which I play a ton of, illustrators are used all the time. For example, when I played high school basketball, the point guard, which is the guy who takes the ball up most times, would always do this with his hands, which basically just was horns. And it meant that he needed a screen to basically have an isolation and either shoot or go to the basket. And it was just interesting. We all knew what that meant, but nobody else on the court, the audience, or the other team really knew what that meant except for us. And the same thing in soccer. There's tons of illustrators, with your hands that you can do, and even with your eyes, you just look one way to put the other team off, or to signal your teammate to go a certain place. And illustrators are just something that's really, really cool. And in baseball, also, illustrators are used. You'll see coaches calling plays with hand signals, and even football as well. So I thought that was really cool and relatable. Another type of nonverbal communication that I thought was really interesting is something called haptics. And these are basically how touching a person basically signals a form of communication and sends a message. So, for example, a high five or a pat on the back or a hug and other things too. And I put cultural by this because I thought this was really interesting how when I have interacted with people of different cultures, like it's interesting to see how the haptics they use are so different. So, for example, in soccer, I play with people from all over the world, from South America, from the US, from Africa, from everywhere. And I think it's really interesting. For example, like say if I scored a winning goal in my past, some people from the US, they'll give me a high five or pat me on the back or even, rub my head or something like that. But some of my friends from South America or something, if I score a winning goal, it's like end of the world almost, they'll like pick me up and hug and carry me. And, it's just, I understand both of them are extremely happy and excited that we won the game, but it's just a different form of excitement that different cultures use. And another example of this is like different families of my friends that I have met, sometimes some of my friends from the US, all of their families, handshakes and eye contact, it's really important. But some of my friends from South America, when I go to their house, it's like hugs and kisses on the cheek. And it's just interesting how cultural differences change the haptics. And I understand they both, they're both greeting me and it's all nice and everything, but it's just interesting how it's different. And the last form of nonverbal communication I thought was really interesting, especially in current times, is called proxemics, which is basically how the distance between people sends off a message or sends communication. So say you're on a date with someone, you're going to sit across from them fairly close because you're trying to send a signal that you're interested and you want to listen to what they have to say. But maybe you meet someone at the park or at the supermarket and you don't necessarily have to be, a few feet away from them. You can stand further and, say what's up or something like that. And the reason why I put COVID effect by this is because even within my own family, I found this to really be interesting. For example, if my uncle is telling me a story or something, I want to be like, up close with him and next to him and listening. But it's changed now with COVID because, I want to be safe and be smart. So I'm further from him, but it doesn't feel the same as if I was right there and he's telling me a joke or a story. And it was just something really interesting that I think is just how proxemics has been affected in our current times. The next chapter I thought was really interesting was chapter 6, which was about relationships and conflict resolution. And I think this is something that I myself can work on. And I know, my family is very short tempered, and we can all work on this. Something called the affection exchange theory was really interesting to me. It's basically how affection molds you, when you're born, and how it helps you basically to survive throughout your life. And I thought this was really interesting because the book mentioned how when we're young, we're taught affection, and our mother is always hugging us and kissing us when we're really, really young. And then at a certain age, we almost outgrow or are embarrassed of those certain affections, such as if your mom wants to hug you in front of, or kiss you in front of your friends when you're, in middle school or something. It's like embarrassing. But I thought this was really interesting because the book mentioned how we outgrow this. But now, I'm not too old. I'm only 19, but it's funny to me how I don't feel any embarrassment. And when I'm at college for a long time, I don't care who's watching, I just want to show love and affection to my family. It doesn't matter if the whole world's watching. So I just found that interesting that the book mentions how you outgrow it, but I feel like I came back to it. I definitely was embarrassed at some point when I was younger, but I definitely came back to it. Another thing that was really interesting about this chapter was called iMessages, which is not the iMessage that I have in the image, but I just thought it would be interesting to put that there. But these type of iMessages are basically messages or different types of ways we can say something to someone that can de-escalate conflict. So basically, for example, the book uses, if a student were to come late to class, a teacher could say, "Why are you late?" or "What are you doing?" And this could definitely cause conflict to escalate. But an iMessage in that situation could be saying something like, "I would really appreciate it if you come to class on time," or "I would really appreciate it if you let me know you're going to be late ahead of time." And these are just messages that I think are really cool to use and effective in de-escalating situations. And the last thing about this chapter I thought was cool was something just different styles of conflict resolution, and which styles I thought were interesting and which styles I thought were also interesting but less effective. For example, a style in the book known as the avoiding style is basically when you decide to completely avoid conflict and totally just walk away from it. And I thought, this can be effective, I guess, in certain scenarios. But for me, I've always tried, maybe not the proper way, but I've always tried to settle a problem or conflict with, maybe too often, a style known as the competing style, which is a conflict resolution style where I am always trying to win, which is something I definitely should and must work on, because that's not always the best way to do it. For example, a style that I really am trying to adapt and incorporate into my life is a style known as the accommodating style, which is basically maybe I have to sacrifice something in order to, settle the argument or for the better of the argument. So other styles were really also interesting too. So basically, that was my final speech. Just wanted to say I really enjoyed the course. I think I got a little bit better at speaking. I'm not necessarily in front of an audience, a live audience, but still think I learned some things and I definitely got better at speaking. And I'm really glad I took this course. So thank you.